And what is good, everybody? Jonathan Wells here with my first solo podcast. We're going to be doing some of these. It's going to be, sometimes with guests, sometimes solo podcasts here for you guys. So hopefully you don't get, too annoyed with me, but, you came here, so, this is what it's going to be, right? It is currently 11:10 on a Monday, and I've had a day. Not gonna lie, it's been a good day for sure. Better than most days. It's just been a really busy day. Really busy day. Really had a lot of good things that happened, but again, like I'm still working. I was trying to film this, by 9, and here we are 2 hours later. Getting into it. So, anyways, I have earned a cocktail. And I think that since we're doing solo podcasts now, I think I'm going to have a cocktail every time I do a solo podcast. I think that's going to be the move. So we're going to give a little drink review at the beginning, and I think that's going to be kind of a thing that we do. So I have these are Good Boy vodka seltzer. They're not seltzers. They're Good Boy like cocktails, I guess, canned cocktails. It is John Daly's cocktails. If you guys follow golf, that is he's a professional golfer. So I actually had these at brunch with the missus on Sunday. It's my first time having these, and I don't really remember what I paid for it because I just kind of paid the check and walked out. I didn't really look at the itemization on there, but I got a 8-pack at the liquor store that afternoon. And I paid $22 for an 8-pack, which is kind of a ripoff in my opinion. They're really good, but I don't know if they're that good, right? So, anyways, this one that I have is the blackberry iced tea. It is the only flavor I have not tried yet. For those guys who don't know what a John Daly is, by the way, it is actually a drink as well. So you know how Arnold Palmer, that was hard to say, Arnold Palmer is iced tea and lemonade, right? Well, John Daly is just that with vodka, right? So, anyways, this is a flavored one: blackberry iced tea and lemonade with vodka. Oh, we're gonna crack it open here and see how it tastes. Not bad. A little on the sweet side. These are all a little on the sweet side, to be honest with you. They say it's only 95 calories, but I'm not really convinced. That is pretty good, though. I do like that. Definitely a move if you guys have money to spend $22 on an 8-pack. That is ridiculous, by the way. Definitely going to stick to light beers, summer shandies, and natter days. So, anyways, yeah, no, it's pretty good. Definitely, I would rate it a solid 7.3 out of 10. So, there's a review there. Also, I'm super excited, guys, because I've been trying to film solo podcasts for the last 2 months, but I've had some serious long haul COVID where I've been so congested I can barely speak, and that does not make for very good podcasting. So that's on me. Finally able to make this work here. I've gotten just uncongested enough to actually do this. So today we are going to talk about let's talk about I don't know, something with real estate. We find some topic ideas here for you guys on the notes app. Let's talk about recasting. So, and we're gonna talk about I guess we'll just title this one mortgage hacks, right? So we're going to talk about a couple different hacks that you can do if you're looking to purchase a home and you want to get the best deal out there, right? Or, make it the most convenient possible, right? All right, cool. So let's talk about recasting. So let's say you are going to go purchase your next home, right? Or it could be your first home, doesn't matter. You're just going to go and make that go through that transaction, right? And let's say you're going to be getting some financial windfall, whether it's selling your current place that you have, maybe it's you're getting money from, you're pulling money from a retirement account, or you're getting a check from your parents or something like that, right? There's most of the time you can actually time it right where you get that check before closing, right? So if you're pulling it out of a retirement account, getting a gift, or doing something like that, you can always you can typically get those funds before you actually close on the home. However, in the case where, you're selling one property and purchasing the next one, or, there's some other logistical loophole you have to go through to actually receive those funds, and that doesn't happen before closing, you can actually put down money on top of your, pay off more of your loan, so put more money down essentially after the loan closes, right? Now, different loan programs are going to have different restrictions on this, as far as like mortgage insurance and things like that. But you can, essentially put more money down. So here's an example of what I've done with a client in the past. I had a client that was going to purchase their next home. They were selling their current primary, and they, weren't. They were like, they could qualify for both housing payments, and they only had like enough to put down 5% that was in their bank account, right? So they like 30 grand, 30 or 40 grand in their bank account, and they needed like 25 to 30 to close with 5% down on the new place. And they had, they were going to put down like 100,000 from the sale of their home, right? So what I told them was, you like this home that you see right now, you're not going to be able to get it unless you can put down unless you can buy it right now without selling your current home, right? The sellers aren't going to wait for you to sell your existing home. They want to close right now, right? So I was like, put down the $25,000. You're going to be in there with 5%, for your down payment. So you're taking out a loan for 95% of what the purchase price is. And then what you're going to do is, once that home sells within 1 to 2 months after you've closed on the new place that you're purchasing, when your home sells, you're going to take another $80,000 and you're going to put that down on that next payment. And so they did, and I showed them this is what your payment will actually go to once you make that, that additional down payment essentially, right? So you can select for all that money to be paid towards the principal of the home. You're buying down the mortgage balance. In this case, they now paid it down to 20%. They have a 20% down payment essentially after the fact. Their loan gets recasted, which when you're taking out a mortgage, you're taking out the loan really for that specific time frame. So they took out a loan for 30 years. Doesn't matter what the balance is, you can always restretch that payment or recast that payment out to the original term that you had. So let's say it's 6 months in, you owe, you're at 29 years and 6 months, right? Doesn't matter if you have 10 grand left on that mortgage, you can still stretch that payment out to 29 years and 6 months, if you follow me on that. So in this example, 2 months in, they had their home sold. They put the rest of the money towards the down payment. They got rid of mortgage insurance because they were able to request to have that removed since they paid it down to the 20%. And they were able to recast that mortgage back over the existing term that they had, which resulted in them dropping their payment to, the payment range that they had desired, that they expressed to me when they actually were, when we were actually talking about getting them pre-approved. So again, that is a really good hack for you to use. If you're coming into money that you might not have in time to make the down payment, you can still make a down payment after the fact, without needing to like redo the whole loan and actually incur more fees. In most cases, that recasting is going to cost you between $250 and $500 with the loan servicer, whereas if you were to refinance, that would cost you a couple grand. So it's a very easy way for you to do that, especially without having to change, your interest rate on that mortgage that you currently have. So hope that helps. That is pretty good. Okay, cool. Next thing we're going to talk about is okay, cool. Removing a borrower to get a better interest rate. So this happens not all the time, but enough times for me to mention, right? So okay, let's say you and your significant other are applying for, a home loan, right? And let's say you both, make, let's say 70 grand a year, right? So you're making about $140,000. Let's say that your significant other has a slightly better credit score than you, maybe a couple points higher, but they have less debt, right? Like you have most of the debt. You've got the car loan in your name, you've got the credit cards in your name, you're the one that went to school, they're the one that got into a job where they didn't have to take out as much debt, whatever the case may be, right? And let's say that you guys want to purchase a home, roughly around $320,000, right? And you're looking in Indiana where taxes are a little bit cheaper, um, and that's going to fit the lifestyle that you guys want to have, right? Well, in that case, what I would recommend is, since you're making $140,000 in Indiana and both your credit scores are very similar, uh, you're not like the incentives for you to purchase are not as high as it would be if your partner was applying by themselves, right? So there's a thing called area median income, which you can find every city has an area median income. Typically, it's going to be right around the $100,000 range, and essentially what that's gathering is the average or the median household income for that area, which again most households have two people in them, is going to be around that $100,000 range. So if you're a first-time homebuyer with good credit and you're looking at a conventional loan option, and you make under the median, so typically it's your cap is usually about 80,000 because it's about 80% of what the median is. You have to make under that. Then you qualify for certain incentives, which would give you a better interest rate. In this case, you only have to put down 3%, or you could even put down 1% if you wanted to. There are some products out there as well like that. And you're essentially getting the same interest rate as somebody who would be putting down 20%, right? Now, the reason why they do that is they're incentivizing homeownership for first-time buyers, especially first-time home buyers with higher credit, right? Because it's a lower risk, it helps people get into their first place, and everyone's happy, right? Now, at the end of the day, though, they're only verifying income for people who are on the application. There are loan products out there that will require you to disclose any income from any person living in the household. Things like USDA would do that. But for this particular product, it's only the income that you list on the application, right? So that's where you both could be on title to the property, you both can have ownership in the property. However, just by applying in one person's name in that regard is going to help get you a better interest rate, right? So that is a little hack there too. Obviously, I've also had clients that, their partner maybe had a worse off credit score than they did. And, at that point, we're just like, hey, or maybe the partner doesn't have any income, right? Maybe there's, some dynamic where they stay at the house a little bit more often. That's fine too, right? There's times where I tell clients intentionally, hey, why don't we leave the partner off of the application to get you a better deal? But that partner can still be on title so that they still have ownership interest in the property. Obviously, in case something happens, like you want to have ownership interest of that property. And it actually works out better for the person that doesn't get on the mortgage application because they have all the perks of home ownership without any of the cons of the mortgage associated with them. So it actually works out better for them in the long run too. So yeah, hopefully that made some sense there. Let's also talk about okay, cool. Condo reviews. I love this. This is probably not going to make sense to anybody, but I'm going to try my best to explain it. So, let's say condos are a little bit more like these types of condos that I'm talking about are going to be more found in the city, like in the surrounding areas of like downtown Chicago, right? There are lots of older buildings that are being renovated or even new projects that are being put up where it's considered new construction and it's a condo, right? Um, so very simply, when you're lending on a property that is in a new project and it's it's basically brand new, right? Hardly anybody that's bought these places, there's a little bit more risk associated because we don't know what the long term, you know, I guess like what really that project's going to be doing, like how the performance is going to be in the long term. That's the right word, right? So we don't know what the performance is going to be on that project in the long term. I mean, we know like what the surrounding areas have done and what other buildings that are in the same neighborhood have done. Like we get all of that, but we don't know how that particular project is going to pan out, right? So for the first couple of places that get sold inside of that building, we're gonna really want that person, the applicant, to put down 20%, right? And the reasoning behind that is there's a certain thing called condo reviews, and there's condo like questionnaires that we're going to be asking of the association to get us for information for us to be able to make a decision on if we want to lend on that property, right? There's four things that go into a loan. There's cash, credit, so cash, how much you have to put down and how much you're keeping back in reserves. Credit, what's your credit score, payment history, etc. Pretty self-explanatory there. Income, how much you make, how stable is your job, etc., things like that, right? The fourth item, nobody ever really talks about because it never has anything to do with the borrower. It's called collateral, right? And that's actually the property that you're borrowing that mortgage against, right? The home that you're buying. Um, and so that is, the one that obviously nobody really looks at because it never really applies to anybody on the application. But that's why you get things like an appraisal to see how, what the condition the home is in, what the market value of the home is at. Like that's why you get an appraisal, which, again, is going back to the collateral piece, right? So in this case, we want that client to put down 20% on the first couple of purchases inside of that development. Not because we don't trust the client, but because we want to make sure, again, that we aren't over leveraging against that particular unit. And, 6 months down the road, the rest of the units are selling for significantly less than what the first couple of units sold for, right? So you also want to make sure that you have an established budget for the condo association. They're collecting enough dues to pay all the utilities with the property, things of that nature, right? And so again, like in the first couple of sales, it's very risky for you to, to make that work, right? Like we don't know all the details and we don't know what the future is going to hold for that project. So, a easy way to get around that, because most people don't have 20% to put down, right? Like, I think I could probably count on both hands, like, the amount of times I've actually had a client put down 20%. And it's about the same that I've had to take out a 15-year mortgage, to be honest with you. Most of my clients are first-time home buyers, 30-year loans, 10% down at the most, right? And so if you want to purchase a place, you don't have 20% to put down, but you really want that condo, right? You could actually take out that first mortgage, right? So you're taking out a loan from us for, let's say it's for easy math, let's say it's a $500,000 condo, right? So, or $500,000 condo, 20% would be $100,000. Well, you can take out a mortgage for 400,000 because that's 20%, or that's 80% of the value of the place that you're purchasing. But you could also take out a stacked second, which would be a second mortgage for $50,000, typically in this case, to be roughly around 10% you could pull out on that. And so now you're able to, with two loans, you're able to pull out the 450. Now you're only responsible for the $50,000 remaining that you need for the down payment, plus your closing costs at that point, right? And typically with new construction, you'll have builder incentives and things of that nature. So that's a really creative way too, to get into a project like that without needing to put down 20%. Now, sometimes people use these for that. More commonly, what they would use a second mortgage for in a purchase scenario would be if, like, let's say a home you're buying is worth $1 million, right? And you can only take out a loan for like $736,000 and some change, because that's the maximum loan amount that we have right now for a Fannie Mae or a Freddie Mac mortgage. But you only want to put down 10%, which is $100,000. Well, you need to bridge the gap there because you'd be short still, like, 164,000 and some change, right? And in that case, you would take out the stacked second, or actually you'd be only short like 64,000 because that would bring it to 900,000. You have the $100,000 down payment for 10%. So yeah, you get what I'm saying. That would you would take out a second mortgage for $64,000. You're in it for 10%. You've got your first mortgage up to the max loan amount, and then you have a small second mortgage at that point. So the reason why people do that though is because you do have loan products called jumbo loans that go above what the max conforming amounts are. However, jumbo loans are a pain in the butt. Like, they're way more stricter on guidelines. Rates sometimes typically aren't better, just depending on who you go through. And it's a lot more of a hassle, and obviously it's more expensive too. So this is a good way for you to creatively get around it. If you're trying to finance something 3 million and up, you're pretty much all jumbo at that point. But anything like right around that 1 to 1.5 number and below, you can do a first with a stack second. Or if you're looking at a condo that you want to do a limited review on, again, first with a stack second. So hopefully that all made sense there. I'm going to try and keep these around 30 minutes. So I'll put one more question together. Let's see. Okay, here's another good one. Everyone wants to know, like, when are you ready to start looking for a home, right? As a first-time home buyer. So let's say, okay, how do you know you're ready? Number one, are you currently making a house payment? If you're currently making a house payment, chances are you're probably ready. Like, you can most likely qualify if you're already making a house payment. If you can afford a house payment of $1,500 to $2,000, you are ready to purchase your first home. That's number one. Number two, if you can bring at least $5,000, if you have at least $5,000 saved, you might not need the whole $5,000, right? But I always recommend to have some money going into this, because there's always unforeseen costs, whether it's with the transaction or, after the fact. You want to have some savings too. That's always important to have. But if you have at least $5,000, you can buy a house. And then your credit score, right? Your credit doesn't have to be perfect. Most people want their credit to be in the 800s and then buy their first home. It's not realistic. You gotta keep in mind, like, what are the programs out there for you? What are things you can do to, you don't have to be perfect, right? So really, a credit score of 640 is more than fine. 640 is like the new 700, right? 640 will qualify you for any down payment assistance product, any grant that's out there, any first-time homebuyer product. You have a 640, you're going to be fine. You're going to have at least a couple options for you, right? If you're a 600, that's fine too. I've seen people get approved with less. 600 is kind of like the bare minimum. Like, really, 620 is kind of the bare minimum, right? But between 620 and 600, it just depends on what's going on with your credit. If you're below 600, it is still possible, right? I've seen it before. That's not an issue as long as you haven't filed bankruptcy yesterday, right? But there have been, I've seen people get approved with 580 credit scores before. That is doable. However, it's a lot more difficult, right? Way more difficult when you have, between that 580 and 600. It's definitely, not a walk in the park, right? But like I said, 640 above, you're golden. 640 to 620, most likely. 640 to 600, still doable. Couple hoops you gotta jump through, but we can make it happen. 600 to 580, a little dangerous, but there's usually a couple things we can do to get your credit jumped up a couple points, get you back to a 600, or, if you have assets and money tucked away, like, that's going to be just fine, right? So I hope this is educational for y'all. Please let me know if you have any questions. My email is Jon, Jon Wells, Wells, at leader, Leader, the number one.com. Please email me with any questions that you have. I'd love to air some questions for you guys. And we're going to be rolling these out. I don't know how many I'm going to do per, I'm not really sure how many of these I'm going to do per week. Maybe a few. We'll see. I mean, I really like talking to the microphone. I enjoy, recording my voice for millions of, listeners to be hearing me, because I'm sure at least I'll get like 1 or 2 listeners on this. So, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this. Again, please give me any feedback. And these seltzers are not too bad, but still a little pricey. Also, really quickly before I sign off, the cost of meat is so expensive. I might become a vegetarian. I was trying to grab a steak today because it was a long day. right? And I have chicken in the freezer. I have chicken in the freezer, but it's not thawed yet. And I'm not going to sit here with boiling water, or just hot tap water trying to defrost chicken when I've already had a long day. So I went to the local Strachan Van Tills, and a pound of ribeye was damn near $20. And I thought to myself that that was ridiculous because that same steak last week was like, I think $13. So I drove all the way from the Winfield Strax to the Crown Point Strax, which is about 12 minutes away. And I walked in. I was on the phone with a realtor that I work with, and we were just cutting it up for a second, talking about a client. And I walk in, and I was telling him, I was like, can you believe the price of meat, right? And I walk up, and I see ribeye and New York strip still $20 a pound. And I was like, this is insane. So I'm like, well, on principle, I'm not going to spend $20 for a pound of meat. That is just ridiculous to me. So I grabbed, what was it, sirloin? Yeah, disgusting, by the way. Yeah, I mean, if you like sirloin, like, get some taste, right? Like, that's all I got to say about that. But pound of sirloin, it was a little bit over a pound of sirloin. It was $11. And I was like, you know what? On principle, I will buy this steak and I'll eat it, right? So, took it home, put some salt on it. I have like this spice blend that I use. It's garlic, salt, pepper, all that jazz. And here's the secret if you're going to cook a steak. If you have a coffee machine, which I'm assuming most of you have, if you have an espresso machine, this is even better. But if all you have is coffee machine, at least hopefully you're able to grind your own beans. This is making me sound way more bougie than I intended to. But if you could freshly grind some beans and have some, just like ground coffee, right? Or if you buy pre-ground coffee, but it's still fine. Take some of that and rub a little bit of the pre-ground or the freshly ground, preferably the freshly ground coffee on top of your steak, seasoning it like you would with salt and pepper. And then put the salt and pepper on there and make sure that that thing is coated in the coffee grounds and the salt and pepper. And again, this is why I buy thick steaks, because I have a tendency to over season things. But if you ain't over seasoning, it's worse if you're under seasoning, right? And I like my steak a little. I like the flavor of it being seasoned. And obviously, you get thick steaks, and it's fine. It's not overpowering. It draws out the flavor of the meat, right? So you do that, sear it on both sides, and then you kind of let it bake in the upper rack of the grill for a little bit. Like that. That's America right there. That's what God intended when He invented the cow, right? All I'm saying is, if you ain't seasoning your steaks with coffee grounds, you should give it a try and maybe rethink some life decisions. So, anyways, that is all from me. I hope you guys have a blessed day. Again, let me know if there's anything I can do to help. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.